Surface condition, the first one right off the top. Well, if we've driven over an area a whole lot, like can happen on a golf course, certain areas of the golf course, right off the tee blocks, all the carts drive in the same place, and you get these very compacted spots coming right off of every teeing area heading out down the fairway. So there's areas out on that course that are going to have a lot of extra compaction. Unless you force the cart to stay on a trail, you're going to end up with added compaction, which is a surface condition. So maybe the same soil down the whole fairway, but up close to the tee block, you may have an area that doesn't take water as well because it has more cart traffic. Also out where everybody hits their drives approximately, out there 200 to 250 yards, there will be a band in there where there'll be cross cart traffic, and you'll end up with another area that will have more compaction than the rest of the course because that's where most of the people will hit their ball to. So that's where the carts tip back out into the fairway again. And so you have spots that are going to be impacted that way. Surface condition in agriculture. Do we have recent cultivation, or has it been 4 months since we cultivated? Over time the ground settles. The way to fluff it back up is run cultivation. So if we had very recent cultivation, we're going to get greater intake rate. It's going to improve the intake capability of the soil. If it's been compacted, or if we've had a real heavy downpour, Mother Nature has done a little sealing of the soil on us by beating us up with a little cloud burst. It's going to smash all that soil down tight, and we're going to have a surface that's been what we call sealed off, and it's going to be very hard for the water to penetrate through that. The only way we can amend that is go in and cultivate it. So we're going to have to run a cultivation if that happens. And it will happen. Those little cloud bursts can really mess up your surface condition. Do we have a cover crop? If we're in an orchard, do we have grass planted down the rows? It makes it a lot easier for the soil to hold the water in place if we have a solid cropping. Is it alfalfa or wheat or something like that that is real dense versus crops that are very sparse growing, like onions or carrots, where you just have a little narrow row every so many inches, 24, 30 inches, whatever the seeding spacing is on them, with very little foliage in there to cover up. Row crops tend to have a surface condition of a furrow with the areas hilled up where the plants are. If you're growing potatoes or corn, we definitely hill up over the potatoes or hill up in the corn rows and leave a furrow between the rows. Well, it's like a natural ditch. If we're putting water on too fast, it'll just start running down the ditch. So we can do things to break up that ditch. We make little pits in that ditch so it can't just flow freely down that ditch. Make little reservoirs. We go in there with a pitting machine and literally every couple of feet or so scoop a hole and raise the soil up on the back side of the little machine. There's this little paddle that comes through, digs a hole, scoops, and the soil falls off the back of the paddle. Makes a little dam with a hole. Every couple of feet there's a little dike and a hole. So you got little mini reservoirs going right down the furrow, and that traps it from running down the field. Makes it a little tough when you're in there harvesting. You bounce along a little bit, but hey, it keeps the water in the field. So there's ways of amending a surface condition problem. The physical characteristics of the soil. Is it granular? Have we managed to get really nice crumb-sized particles, or have we just beat the liver out of it so that it's been pulverized and it's broken into real tiny fine particles? Different farming techniques are going to create that problem. What's its texture? Is it sandy by nature, silty, clayey? What's the combinations? We've talked a lot about texture already, and we know that that's going to have a major effect on how readily the water is going to enter. The kind of cropping we have. The crop itself and also the crop that was in beforehand. If we just went through a year of potatoes on a field, there's no residual put back in the ground after you grow potatoes. The vines just turn into dust, powder. It's not like if you grew corn or wheat. When you grow corn or wheat, you disc that stubble back in, you have a lot of organic material, so the cropping practice has left you a lot of added porosity due to all of the trash that you put back in that top layer of soil. Whereas potatoes, it's left you nothing to work with, and you have a pretty sterile environment as far as organics are concerned to deal with. So you don't have the benefit of the tilth from residual crop material from the previous crop. And also the kind of crop you're growing at the time is going to have an effect. You know, if you have a dense crop, the most dense of all would be turf. You have a real nice anchor there with turf, it's hard for water to move in turf. Droplet hits, it's kind of trapped in its spot. It takes a lot of energy for it to work its way through all those little leaves of grass to move even a foot or two. So you're not going to get runoff very easily in turf. But you sure can in any row crop. You know, we create the runoff potential for row crops. So those would be the extremes. Slope. Slope's going to have a huge effect on surface conditions if we are right at the cutting edge of being too much intake rate. You know, if we're not too much intake rate, but too high a precipitation rate for the soil to intake it. The more slope, the more radical this gets. That you actually start losing intake rate capability as you get steeper slopes, because it doesn't give it as much time to soak in before it wants to start going diagonally down that slope. Water quality. Water quality would mainly be looking at the minerals in the water. It's going to have an effect on how that water penetrates into soil. If you have certain minerals that like to tie up on the surface, if you have salts coming into in that water, it's not going to penetrate near as readily as not unsalted water. You know, if you have a nice balanced pH of 7 in that water, it's certainly going to penetrate more readily than a pH of 8 or 8.5 will.